welcome back. We're here again to chat with you about General Conference.
What a lovely topic.
What a lovely topic. About. We were going to talk about this on TikTok, but I feel like there's way too much content to go over to just talk about it on TikTok, like in 60-second pieces. Like, I think we did one video on it, but I feel like it's just not enough.
Yeah, no. Not enough to rant, at least.
No. And so, for those who don't know, General Conference happens twice a year in the Mormon Church. It's basically, it's kind of like if you went to a work conference for a company where there's like multiple different speakers over 2 days.
Mostly men.
4 sessions, a bunch of speakers.
2 hours each.
Yeah, 2 hours each. The prophet speaks, and so it's a pretty big deal. They broadcast it worldwide. Everybody watches. There's no church that weekend. It's kind of a big deal.
So yeah. We didn't watch it. We weren't going to waste our time like that.
No.
Because everybody already thinks we're wasting our time doing this.
Yeah.
So we're not going to waste our time doing that other stuff. We were just going to pick out the highlights. That way we don't have to sit through the indoctrination.
Yeah.
So we picked out a couple things. Well,
there's 2 talks we want to talk about.
Yeah. A couple little excerpts that we wanted to touch on and just kind of talk about.
So the first one is by Jeffrey R. Holland. And when I was in the church, when we were active, I loved Elder Holland. Like, I felt like he just, I mean, and this is still true, he just has he is a really phenomenal public speaker. Like, he's very gripping, he's very intriguing, he pulls you in, he has a very eloquent way of speaking.
Well, he has multiple degrees in English. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, he's very well-rounded in that sense. And so his talks, I mean, he's a Mormon favorite for sure. His talks don't disappoint.
I had like a big folder, a fat folder of talks on one of my flash drives by him, all by him, just to listen to him when I was on my mission.
So there you go. So, like, a lot of conference talks, especially for kids, are like, oh my gosh, I don't want to listen to this. But usually, I mean, Holland is like,
like
a fan
riveting
favorite.
And shares these really like stories that really draw you in and things like that. That's why I always loved him. Now that my paradigm has shifted, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is a problem.
Yes.
To say the least.
So he did a talk, and I skimmed most of it. I didn't want to read the whole thing. It's kind of context being, you know, there's a lot of ugly in the world right now, and so our priority, Mormon's priority, needs to be like prioritizing the gospel and being kind and being pure and chaste and all these things. And so there was a talk that stood out for us that we heard a quote, and so I had to go read the rest of it, but I'll kind of give you the context here. So it's really common in the church to say wickedness never was happiness. And so
it's a quote from the Book of Mormon.
It is a quote from the Book of Mormon. And so he says, wickedness never was happiness, an ancient prophet once said. When the dance is over, the piper must always be paid, and most often it is in a currency of tears and regret. Do you want to start on that one?
Oh no, I'll yield the time to you on that one.
It's just very...
scare tactics.
It is, and it's very...
manipulative?
Yes. Like so many things. But as for current members especially for current members who are dealing with family members or friends or people that they know who have left the church, it's a very easy, like, look, there you go.
A quick little jab.
It's like sly, but it's a super obnoxious comment. Like, you can go and continue to not be a part of the church, and you can go and continue to do the things you're going to do and live in sin and be terrible people, but at the end of the day, you gotta pay the piper.
You gotta pay the piper.
And it's gonna be in regret and tears. And so it just goes to show this large superiority complex within the church. This very large superiority complex of, they are the only one in true church, right? And they hold that near and dear. That attitude prevails throughout the church. And so this bleeds ever so significantly through this talk, because people are like, oh, well, you're wrong. So I guess
you'll find out soon enough.
And it's just very obnoxious.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily, I mean, it's very prominent in the Mormon church, but it's also not unique to the Mormon church. Because, I mean, you'll see, like, people, like Christians, commenting on things that atheists say, and they'll be like, oh, well, once it's all said and done, you will know, and you'll be so regretful. Like,
what
based
does that
on
do?
what? Yeah. What are you
help?
trying to accomplish by saying something like that? Like, are you going to change my mind, Jeff Holland? Now that I've seen and heard the things that I've seen and heard, and I'm 100% not turning back. Like, do you think that this sort of jab is going to make me, like, regret what I want to do or anything like that? It's
well, and the fact of the matter is,
so asinine.
The membership reports come out during conference. Is it only during April?
I think, it's
only once. Yeah, so during the April conference, the membership reports come out. So that details, like, how many members, how many converts, kids being baptized, et cetera, et cetera. And so that came out in April, and their growth rate, while they're still growing, based on other data that we can see, and I mean, based on the church's data itself, they're losing church members, specifically in the young adult population, in droves. And so this kind of calloused attitude towards people who are walking away or struggling or, you know, living in sin. If you just tell me, you know, your currency will be paid in tears and regret, I'm like, does that make me want to come back to church? Does that make me feel like you are being a Christ-like individual reaching out to me and saying something positive? Like, this is not...
It's ridiculous what it is. And she didn't pull up the quote, but one of the other two women that spoke in the entire, like, 500 minutes of people speaking, said that eternity is the wrong thing to be wrong about, which is, like, totally in the same vein for me. Like, total scare tactics, like, oh, you don't want to be wrong, because about if eternity. You're wrong forever. And
to me, it just shows that so much weight is put on the consequences of leaving rather than I have faith in this and that's why I'm staying. Like, to me, it's a very, like, poignant observation of, well, I mean, even if you don't really believe it, like, wouldn't you rather stay so you're not wrong about eternity? Like,
it's like, well, we tell them all these nice things, and if they're not going to stay for the nice things, then maybe we can get them to stay by showing them the bad things and tell them, well, these are going to be the consequences if you don't do this thing, which is already a major, major thread in the church, because they'll be like, oh, well, if you don't pay your tithing, then bad things are going to happen to you, and there's all these anecdotal experiences of all the bad things that happen when someone didn't pay their tithing, or... oh, if you don't wear the garments, then you're not protected, and sin will befall you, and just all these other scare tactic type things. It's just...
well, and it's just, eternity is the wrong thing to be wrong about. Like, again, it's just a very, like obnoxious comment. Like, it's, like, it's very elitist. It's very, I'm better than you. It's very... yeah.
I've got it figured out. Do you?
Yeah, mentality. Like, eternity is the wrong thing to be wrong about. Like, oh my heavens. Yeah. Wow, okay.
Well, and it was very telling with the overwhelming reactions that I saw on Facebook, like, immediately after it was said. Like, everybody was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And I'm just sitting here like, oh, I would have been steaming.
Well, and honestly, it's ammunition, because... again, when you're a person in the church, when you're an active member of the church, and you have people in your circles or an extended family that have left the church or are struggling or are considering leaving, this is just ammunition handed to those active members that they spew back at the people who are thinking about leaving.
Yeah. Doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith.
It's that 2.0, right?
Yeah.
That was another conference talk from Dieter F. Uchtdorf.
Back in the day, like
a while ago.
Probably over 10 years now.
But that's just like, it took probably, I don't know, a few hours after that talk before I saw that being spewed left and right on Facebook. And I'm like, that is not encouraging to your friends and family who have left or are considering leaving or struggling. Like, that's a very, like, you idiot. Eternity is the wrong thing to be wrong about. Damn it. What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you?
So that was another one. I can't remember who it was that did that one.
Joy D. Jones.
Joy D. Jones.
I think she's in the primary general presidency.
Yeah. So the second one, well, the third one, really. The third talk, I mean, the gold medal of ridiculousness of the whole thing, was the Prophet's talk.
Who we, when we were Mormon, also really loved because we thought he was super progressive compared to other prophets. But...
which in some ways he is.
Yeah.
He's made a lot of changes in the church, and people are looking at that with a positive eye.
Yeah.
So, in the last session, the Sunday afternoon, or was it Sunday morning?
Sunday morning
session, he got up and talked about faith, lots of emphasis on faith. And this is actually a talk that we did listen to the majority of it. Even though it was
painstakingly.
It was difficult. So I'm just going to read
at 1x speed
some of these things that he said. So, if you have doubts about God the Father and his beloved Son, or the validity of the restoration, or the veracity of Joseph Smith's divine calling as a prophet, choose to believe and stay faithful. Take your questions to the Lord and to other faithful sources. Study with the desire to believe, rather than with the hope that you can find a flaw in the fabric of a prophet's life or a discrepancy in the scriptures. Stop increasing your doubts by rehearsing them with other doubters.
Oh, this one. Ooh. This was the one that sent us, like, as soon as we read it, because we heard people were like, oh my gosh, the prophet's talk just really touched me and it strengthened my testimony. And reading that, I was just blown away that he's encouraging you. Basically, he's like, you can ask questions and you can have doubts. But in order to answer those questions and resolve those doubts, this is the place that you have to go look. I don't have the answer for you.
And you probably won't find one.
And you might not find one, but you have to look here. And if it's not there...
pray about it. And if it doesn't get revealed to you, then ask an angel when you get there.
Yeah. Okay, that was something we learned about recently, and I'm glad I never heard that. Well, I'm a little sad, actually. I probably would have gotten out a little sooner. But, like, information control, first of all, behavior control also, because they're like, well, just believe. Just choose to believe. You hear all this bullshit about the church, not only the church founder, but also the modern church. And you hear all that, you should just choose to believe. And your good experiences should override those things that you've heard, because they're likely not true. When they are,
don't seek them out.
Verifiably true. So it just is, they've kind of dropped the thinly veiled trope of, oh yeah, you can, I mean, it's
painful.
I can't even finish my thought. It's painful.
It's painful. This talk is really painful. And honestly, I feel like this was a step out of character for Russell Nelson.
At least it seemed. But we also sort of shifted our paradigm.
Sure.
At the same time. So,
but I mean, even
objectively,
even in his previous conference talks, though, he's not one to, like, there are a few general authorities who are not afraid to chastise and who are not afraid to go after people who have left the church and make, like, some unbecoming comments. So I feel like it was slightly out of character, and I know we're coming from a different kind of perspective now that we're not in anymore. However, I feel like that's just not typically his game, is to...
That was kind of the vibe that I got, because I've met Nelson before he was the prophet. He visited my mission, and then the historically inflammatory one, Dallin Oaks, also came to my mission, and like what she is saying was like totally corroborated. Like, I did not get the same vibe from Nelson that I did from Oaks. Like, he was way more low key, and I felt more inspired than him. And Oaks, I just felt like he was gonna send me home because I was playing cards with my companions too late. So I don't know.
So that's kind of the interesting thing, is I feel like he's stepped out of what he usually does. And I feel like now, I mean, the ex-Mormon community took the doubts thing as a slap in the face.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, it's bizarre and it's difficult, and rehearsing doubts, like, the phrase rehearsing bothers me, because I feel like it's like there's this weird perception for people who have left the community or have left the Mormon church that they didn't want the church to be true. And so the research they did and the material that they sought out and the people that they talked to, the only reason they sought any of those things out or continue to seek those things is because it's like reaffirming the bias that they have that the church isn't true. And that couldn't be farther from the truth in these cases, but that's what the church likes to tell people. Like, they just want to go and be part of the Exmo community because, you know, it's an echo chamber where they'll all get their, you know, their voices will be heard and their feelings will be validated and all of these things. When in fact, it's just a community of people who stepped outside of the church bias, looked at factual information, verifiable information, unbiased information, and came to a conclusion that it wasn't true. Yeah. And so I don't need to be a part of the Exmo community or the Exmo TikTok community or the Exmo YouTube community to validate my own feelings about what the church is or isn't. That's not why we're here.
But it is nice because
it's community. Yeah.
It's exactly the mirror image of what you lose when you leave the church. So I think they're trying to kind of come out of an angle of, well, you shouldn't go to those people because then you realize that you can have community and have friends outside of the church.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is another important piece of that is it's another tactic, I feel like, to leaving your community is hard. Telling your family that you're leaving is hard. Being the only person, being like the first person to have left after multi-generations of Mormons is hard. And so I feel like we're just stacking the deck of things that make it difficult to leave the church. So that was kind of one of the first things that stood out to us in that talk. Another one, so this one I thought was also interesting and also kind of pained me a little bit. A non-believer might say that faith is for the weak, but this assertion overlooks the power of faith. Would the Savior's apostles have continued to teach his doctrine after his death at the peril of their lives if they had doubted him? And more importantly, would Joseph and Hyrum Smith have suffered martyrs' deaths defending the restoration of the Lord's church unless they had a sure witness that it was true? So this, during my days that I was an active member of the church, was a huge pillar of my testimony. Because even when I had doubts in the beginning, I was always like, well, Joseph and Hyrum literally died for this. And so why would they die for something that wasn't true? Like, the church reinforces that narrative in your head.
No, that was a big one for me. Because there was an Elder Holland talk that was talking about, like, never mind that these men would die and leave their wives widows and their children fatherless, and never mind that the pioneers would leave bloody footprints in the snow as they crossed the plains, and all these, like, for instances that the Book of Mormon has to be true because none of this would happen, which then they use evidence that is biased, doesn't show the whole truth for the martyrdom,
Yeah.
the murder, and then also for even the ancient apostles, like that, it's not verifiable. And they're like, well, where you can't verify, you just use substitute faith in for the verifiable evidence, and it's like,
well, in the circumstances, like, it's one thing to cite the apostles, like, that's a totally different thing, but to cite Joseph and Hiram and be like, they died for the restoration.
yeah,
No, they didn't.
No.
That's not the full story.
But let me tell you,
That's not what happened.
I'm 25, almost 26 years old. 2 months ago, I found out that Joseph Smith and all his little gang of homies did not go to jail because their belief of the Book of Mormon. My entire life, thought that's why they were in jail, because the other people around didn't like what they had to say.
There's lots of things that you learn about that experience that is not what the church generally teaches. Yeah. And everybody editorializes, right? And so depending on where you went to church, depending on who your Sunday school teacher was, depending on who your primary teacher or your parents were, you're going to get a different version of that story. But I didn't learn what actually happened until we left the church. And I didn't learn other details like Joseph Smith having a gun, or, you know, the events that Joseph Smith took part in leading up to why he ended up in jail. And those kind of important details that kind of provide context for why things actually happened. Yeah. And they don't, like, the church, the pieces of the puzzle are out there. Like, the truth pieces are out there if you do your research. Some of them are even in the LDS Gospel Topics essays on the church's website, but the church won't piece them together for you. So you get like a really weird unfinished picture.
Yeah. That's like the bits are really far spaced, so you could pick up on it, but you're not going to be led.
But you're not going to put it together unless you're really diving in and doing the research.
Well, and they've got their own trail of really tight-knit breadcrumbs going in an entirely different direction. Like, led like a lamb to the slaughter. Well, he had a pistol, so not really like a lamb to the slaughter. But that's the official narrative that they try to paint, that he was like just going there to die.
Because of religious reasons.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Is that part of it? Sure. Were people not a huge fan of Joseph because he was a Mormon? Sure, that's part of it. But is that the full story? He was also a scumbag. He was also a con man, and he also stole people's money and lied to people and married people's wives and sisters and mothers and daughters, and
sometimes a combination of multiple of those.
Sometimes a pair, right? So it's just not the full picture, and it's not what they teach. It's not what they tell you. It's not what you learn unless you seek it out yourself. So that definitely rubbed me wrong. The other thing that I took a screenshot of was the one that lots of people in the Exmormon community keep referring to.
Yes, it's the big one.
So your mountains may be loneliness, doubt, illness, or other personal problems. Your mountains will vary, and yet the answer to each of your challenges is to increase your faith. That takes work. Lazy learners and lax disciples will always struggle to muster even a particle of faith.
Lazy learners and lax disciples.
So the first part of this talk, Nelson goes into the importance of researching and diving into the scriptures and doing all of these things. And you'd be hard pressed to find an ex-Mormon who hasn't spent more time doing research either after they left or when they were considering leaving than when they were in the church. And so this is a slap in the face to anyone who has left the church, because it continues the stigma associated with people leaving the church that they just wanted to sin, or they took the easy way out, or they're lazy, or they never had a strong testimony to begin with, or all of these god-awful things that they say about people who have left. And this just kind of reinforces all of those things, and it's coming from the prophet. And so it's like, lazy. Like, I did more work after I left the church than I did when I was in. I have done more research, more reading, more everything involving the church after, like, when we were in the space of deciding what to do and then leave it. And so to call people lazy and lax, like we just up and one day decided, oh, I don't want to do church anymore.
I'm over it.
Let's just stop. As if that's what happens for people. That's not what happens.
No. And it's so below him. Like, honestly, it's just, call it like it is. It's name calling.
And it's a dig.
It's a total dig. And it's so juvenile.
It is.
To be like, oh, lazy learners, lax disciples. And I'm like, okay, I was not the best missionary of all time, but I did. So even when I was like a missionary, I would be reading all these things to like corroborate the points that I was making when we would teach these investigators or people that we would talk to. And I mean, I would read in pretty good and use the footnotes to cross-reference between the Bible and the Book of Mormon and other sources and things like that. So I felt like, as per those things that would come up in my missionary work, I felt like I was pretty well, like, read up on the basic stuff. And if I had ever come across, which if God truly called me on a mission to Honduras, he did that so I wouldn't have to really dig into anything that was like unsightly at all, because no polygamy or church history things came up, because that wasn't common knowledge in a third world country. And if I had come across that stuff, I don't think that it would have been reconcilable. And when they're discouraging people with words like that and name calling from discovering the truth because it has some sort of unsightly title or label to it, it's just so sad that they are trying to not reveal how poorly constructed the whole narrative is.
Yeah, well, and it's much easier to just, I mean, I probably would have stayed a faithful member too if I only read the Book of Mormon and didn't read anything else, and only read, church approved material and didn't look at, other historians who don't just have bias for the church. And
even the church's own historians
aren't really historians.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another day.
Yeah.
But overall, I think they lobbed a big old ball to families who have people who are questioning the church in a way to kind of reaffirm or reinforce those negative frameworks or thought processes that they have in their heads about people who have left the church.
I mean, this last year has been, numbers-wise, really tough for them. So this has got to be the last-ditch effort of, well, the nice things don't work, so let's reinforce the negative.
Right, let's reach more towards the scare tactics, because we're still losing people. And this is the funny thing about discernment and revelation and these things, is so many people are impacted by having a family member leave the church or struggling or, in a faith crisis or whatever you want to call it. And that applies to so many members right now. And so this isn't really a talk that's gonna like, it's not speaking to everyone, but it's speaking to a whole lot of people who are in this situation and feel like prayers were answered because, you know,
it reinforced
what they already thought about lazy learners and lax disciples.
Yeah. It's really sad.
It's really unfortunate.
To say the least. I mean, it's already hard enough. They already spun the narrative of, oh, well, you just want to be sinful, or you just can't handle it, so you want the easy way out, which it totally is not. Neither of those things are true.
No.
It's not been an easy decision. I mean, this has been years coming, and it only happened because we had to make a choice.
Well, and I think they like to lead people to believe that, like, one day you just wake up and you're like, church. I don't want to do it.
Well, even funnier than that is, like, a lot of people, even the one Sunday school teacher that I had, who, you know, the one, was like, I don't even like coming to church, but I do it. I'm like, oh my God.
That's funny.
Okay.
That's our reasoning. I don't like coming to church either, but
I do it because eternity is the wrong thing to be wrong about.
What's the stupid meme that's like, I don't want to do this anymore, Grandpa.
Well, that's too damn bad. From Holes.
Well, that's the thing, is it's like, there's just so much. Like, they claim to be this church of understanding and reaching out and looking at other people, like, you know, walking a mile in their shoes and being empathetic and trying to understand. And then they say things like this, and it's like, you guys really don't get it. Like,
you don't practice what you preach.
No, and the leadership, I feel like, couldn't be further off base. I feel like they're absolutely in damage control mode at this point.
Tides are at stake.
Yeah, and membership numbers are plummeting. And yes, they are still growing, but let's look at the graph from the last few years and now, and they're
barely
plummeting.
1% growth.
And so they're in, things are on fire, let's save what we can and what can we do. And so I think they decided to go negative and see what would come of it. And now they're getting, I mean, the members, I'm sure, are living for it, but they're getting smashed by the Exmormon community, because it's not fair. It's not a fair assumption to make that lazy learners and lax disciples can't muster the faith necessary to stay on the covenant path, and can't muster the faith to, you know, doubt their doubts, and can't, because that's not what any of this is about. If I wanted blind faith that the church was true, I would stay. But the fact of the matter is, I can't be faithful to something that I know isn't true. It's not that just, I don't know if it's true or not. I know it's not true. So I can't be in the place of ambiguity where faith might be okay if it's a maybe it is, maybe it isn't, when it's a
it definitely isn't.
Definitely not.
And no amount of faith can counteract it.
No. We're dealing, it's like, facts don't care about your feelings here. Like, we're dealing with history, we're dealing with sources, we're dealing with, I mean, you can read
memory holes, swept under the rug kind of stuff.
You can read just church sources. I would argue that just church sources could get you out as quick as anti-Mormon sources.
Especially if you know where to find the official church stuff.
Information.
That they don't want you to find anymore. Like, you don't even have to go to CES letter. You don't have to go to letter to my wife. If you are just looking in the right places, you'll find pamphlets and old
the gospel
teachings
topics
that you will go, what in the hell is this? So
it's all in the church. Like, they, you know, say that we're just this community that's putting forth all this garbage information that's meant to tear you away from the church. And it's not. It's not the case at all. And they paint us to be, because I thought of the Exmormon community as like these devil worshipping, horrible, like, I legitimately feared them. Like, I wouldn't go on the Exmormon subreddit on Reddit because I was so afraid of what was on there. Like, they instill, and if that's not cult-like behavior, I don't know what it is. I was legitimately scared to go into the Exmo set because I don't know what I thought. I don't know if I thought the devil was going to come for me because I was reading this material. Like, I don't know what it was, but I was legitimately afraid.
Yeah.
I was afraid because they teach you that these people are deceivers and they've lost the light in their eyes and, you know, they're too far off the covenant path. And
they've sold their signs and tokens.
Yep. And
et
just
cetera, et cetera.
All this nonsense. And when I look back on it, I'm like, this is just the perfect way to control information and to prevent members from seeking out a different side of the opinion or a different side of the argument or a different side of the issue. Because what the ex-Mormons are saying isn't evil. Like,
no.
The Mormons and the prophets like to contextualize it as it being evil, but it's not. It's like facts. It's the truth. It's historical accounts. It's discourses. It's journals. It's quotes. It's like, these are all things that we can't just like,
yeah.
You can't argue it away because it happened and it's there.
Yeah.
And that's what I think makes it so frustrating, is because, you know, members feel so entrenched in the truthfulness of it because of their indoctrination and their experiences and, you know, a lifetime in the church. And then you have the people on the other side who also have that, which gives us a unique perspective. But then you add in the fact that we know that it's all
a crock of shit.
Crap. And so we feel just as passionately and deeply about the things that we have to share as Mormons do about the things that they have to share. Yeah. And I think that's where we tend to butt heads in this community.
Yeah. I was a missionary. I know exactly what they talk about. And that's also kind of what we want to dispel, that all these Mormons who stumble upon us, they're like, that's a lie. That's not true. I know what is true. I could tell it to you like a missionary. And then I can go on the other side of the coin and tell you why that's wrong. So when we do our little live streams and stuff like that, we will answer any question under the sun that we know the answer to, without overstepping what we don't know experience-wise. But as far as being a
Mormon,
white American Mormon, we pretty much got it all the experience that there is. So
we did, and we have no reason to lie. We're not trying to make the church out to be like this worse thing than it is. Like, it can stand on its own. They don't even need my commentary for that.
Yeah. But
that's what people think. And so we have nothing to gain by sitting here and making up things that aren't true or lying about things. Like, this is the truth. And we have many, many Mormon members who comment on our TikTok videos and are like, I'm a member and this is 100% factual. Yeah. Because it is.
So
all of these things are verifiable. We've done our research. We've spent the time
doing our research.
Yeah.
We're always looking for...
It's ongoing.
Something else that...
And that's why talks like these are so frustrating, because it kind of minimizes all that and just says, you're lazy.
Well, take it from a lazy learner.
And a lax disciple.
That we do know what we're talking about.
At least in this context.
Yeah. So
we had lots of feelings on conference. This is kind of long-winded. Yeah. I hope it wasn't.
Took a couple different cycles of not having enough iPhone storage to do.
And being too angry to film. It took us a few days to get to this point, because this is touchy for us right now.
Surely we will circle back around to it and touch on it some more, but that was just our thoughts on the subject, and it was too long for a TikTok to split up into.
Obviously.
25. I don't know how those other people do it on TikTok, but So anyway,
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, make sure you check out our TikTok. We do a lot of stuff there because that's
our primary platform.
Yeah, I hope it evolves a little better to a better platform eventually. But check out our Instagram. We'll link that. And thanks for watching and bearing with us. And we would encourage you to also search out the truth. If you have any questions, we do lives all the time on TikTok. So as long as when they're not suspended because people are hating, drop on by and ask us a question. We're
happy to answer.
We answer all questions. So.
And let us know if there's content you want to see specifically, like on YouTube or longer videos. Let us know because we're happy to do more long-winded questions here as well.
If it can fit in a TikTok video, we'll sometimes do that, or just in the comment. But we'd love to hear some thoughts. So thank you very much, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, friends.